background. In Islamic history, there are many ulama in the past that have dedicated entire books to the idea of wisdoms in Sharia. And the reason why that's important is because one of the things that we believe about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Aqidah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Hakim. One of the names of Allah is Al-Hakim. And therefore He is all wise. Everything that He does, everything that He commands has some kind of greater wisdom behind it. It's what we call teleological, right? So there's a kind of telos, there's a kind of end and a purpose behind every single commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some ulama have dedicated their entire lives to discover what those aims and what those goals are from the Sharia. So, in the last 2, 3 centuries, you have Shah Waliullah Dahlawi. He wrote a two-volume book called Hujjatullah al-Baligha, in which he discusses even things like, why do tawaf, right? Why 4 rakat of Salatul Dhuhr, why three for Maghrib, and so on and so forth. And then much before him, you had others as well. Imam Sha'rani, rahimahullah, he wrote a book called Kitab al-Mizan al-Kubra. He discusses actually all four madhahib, and he shows that even though there are different furu', there are different opinions, but they all actually try to achieve the same thing. The overall goals are the same, and the wisdoms are also the same. Um, and likewise, also, uh, we see beforehand Imam al-Shatibi, rahimahullah, uh, he wrote a book called Al-Muwafaqat, in which also he synthesizes the Hanafi and the Maliki school, and he does the same thing again. He talks about the greater wisdoms behind the different ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Sharia. So, what is zakah to begin with, and what are the wisdoms behind zakah? That's basically what we'll cover first, and then inshallah we'll go into the rulings related to it. We're not going to follow the slides 100%. These are slides actually that were prepared by Mufti Faraz Adam. He's a very well-known Mufti from UK. He studied with Mufti Ibrahim Desai in South Africa, rahimahullah. He's very knowledgeable when it comes to Islamic finance. He's a good friend of ours as well. So these are his slides. We're not going to follow them 100%. Some of the things that he actually mentions are based from the UK. So we're gonna, convert some of that, and I'll add some commentary as well on the slides, inshallah. So, what is zakah? Zakah, linguistically, just lexically, if you take it literally, it means just purity, right? And we see in the Quran also, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, and so on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that term basically to mean to purify. It also means an-numa, it means for something to growth, for something to have growth. This is also one of the effects of zakah, that to give actually increases a person's wealth. This is also mentioned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ, that a person gives in charity and Allah multiplies that, right? In a different hadith in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, مَا نَقَصَ مَالٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ, a person gives sadaqah that does not actually decrease from their wealth. So zakah, also one of the effects of that is that a person's wealth grows from giving zakah. In Islamic law and Sharia, the definition is تمليك بعض مال جزما عينه الشارع لفقير مسلم لله تعالى. We'll go over each one of these parts of the definition. In Arabic, actually, definitions are extremely elaborate, meaning that every single component is actually trying to either include something or exclude something. That makes the definition jami' and also mani', that it's inclusive of everything that zakat is, and it's exclusive, so it's excluding everything that zakat is not. So number one, you have tamlik. The idea of tamlik basically is that you transfer, literally it means a transfer of ownership. So there has to be a transfer of ownership that happens between the person giving zakah and the person receiving zakah. Right? There has to be a transfer of ownership. And the transfer of ownership means that there are no kind of, conditions attached with that. There are no, strings attached, as we would say, right? So, for example, if a person says that, okay, you're a poor person, you're zakat eligible, I will pay your rent for you, right? Or I'll buy you food. This actually would not fulfill the conditions of zakat. Your zakat actually would not be paid. It will not be it will basically still be due. And the reason for this is because tamlik requires that you do not put any kind of restriction. You just give the amount or the wealth to that person, right? regardless of what they may do with it. That's basically their business. Um, so so that's tamlik, right? It's tamliku ba'd malin. It's the transfer of ownership of some amount of wealth, jazman, that is fixed, or that a person makes intention to fix for and is such that عينه الشارع لفقير مسلم لله تعالى, that the shari', the legislator, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has specified for a poor Muslim person. Another thing that we can get from here, and we'll cover it more in detail, is that zakat cannot be given to non-Muslims. Right? There's actually misunderstanding regarding that. Some organizations, they will, have aid for non-Muslims, and they'll give zakat amount, and that's completely impermissible. You can give sadaqah. Sadaqah can be given, charity, general charity can be given to non-Muslims, but uh, zakah is specifically the right of the Muslim. And lillahi ta'ala is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Continuing on, uh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. This is something that we see recurring throughout the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions salah, and right after that he mentions zakah alongside it. So we actually see more than 30 places where this occurs, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says, يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ أَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ, and so on and so forth, right? So we can see the importance of zakah by Allah mentioning it right alongside with salah throughout the Quran. And like that, we also see many, many exhortations that are found in hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us to give our due from our zakah to poor people. And the hadith is mentioned there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated upon you, right? افترض عليهم صدقة في أموالهم تؤخذ من أغنيائهم. It's taken from the rich, فترد في فقرائهم, and it is returned to basically the poor people, because this is literally their right. This is something that we owe them, and it has to be given to them. So this is not something basically that a person can say, oh, it's a kind of charity that a person is giving, or it's a favor that they're doing on the poor people. As a matter of fact, actually, that is the right of the poor. That is something that they deserve, and we have to give it to them. So why zakah? So I'll talk about a few things. Obviously, it's a commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you can also see that it does a few things in society, right? The first thing that we can focus on is that it promotes the circulation of wealth. This is something, subhanallah, that is so amazing that we find in Sharia. In our contemporary society, you will see in America, for example, that the top 1% of people in America own 50% of the wealth. And the rest of the 99%, this is well-known fact, you can go check it up. 99% of the population owns only 50%, the other 50%. And 1% owns the top 50% of wealth, right? So there's a huge inequality, wealth inequality. There are so many other stats that you can look at. There used to be, a lot of large corporations a couple of decades ago, and now you see just a few main ones that basically have bought the other ones out. And so you see these kind of monopolies that are created, and that's why it's so dangerous, for example, for small businesses to survive. So one thing that we see in our kind of capitalistic society is you have this huge wealth inequality, right? I remember on YouTube there's a video you can check out. Basically, a person does this exercise. If you were to take Jeff Bezos, if you take his wealth and you put it in bills, and you stack it up to the moon, how many times can you go back and forth, right? Like from Earth to the moon, how many times can you go back and forth if you stack up all his wealth in bills? So it's a tremendous amount of wealth. It's something basically that he won't even need. I remember during COVID, there was 10 million people that were going on food stamps, and during that time, Jeff Bezos went through a divorce, and he lost, I believe it was 30 or 40 billion dollars. Within a couple of months, he made that amount back and some more, right? While there were people, basically going on food stamps. So you see this kind of like economic, this kind of economic uh, inequality and this kind of unfair distribution of wealth that exists within capitalism. So somebody asked a question about giving zakat to certain organizations. We have a section that's dedicated just for that. Where can zakat be given and where can it not be given? I think that is a very important topic to discuss, especially nowadays. There's a lot of misuse and mishandling of zakat that is found in a lot of organizations. That's why it needs to be actually there are no proper regulatory boards for zakat distribution, and I think that's something that should be there. But anyway, khair, so let's continue. So one is it promotes the circulation of wealth. During the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, there was so much lack of corruption and so much distribution of wealth that people in Madinatul Munawwara actually were not even able to find people to give zakat to. This is how how much distribution of wealth ended up happening, right? The second thing that it bridges the gap between the affluent and the needy, right? This kind of relates to the previous point that I mentioned, that you don't have such gaps between the poor and the rich, right? One thing that does actually is creates divisions in society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He made Sharia is to make a kind of cohesive, united ummah. There's so many aspects that you'll see in salah, in fasting, in giving, in basically every single pillar of Islam. You'll find wisdoms to keep society together. And in our current kind of individualistic, capitalistic, consumeristic society that we live in, people are very, in their own shells, in their own kind of just worried about themselves. But what the Sharia does is actually it bridges this gap between people. So the gap between the affluent and the needy basically gets that gap basically goes away. These are two of the things that we can see. And also another one, obviously, it's the right of the needy. That should be pretty straightforward. In North America, that's something that we've never really felt. Like, what does it feel to be poor? People might feel like, oh, I don't have money. What does it mean not to have money in America? It means you're still renting. You haven't bought a house, in Long Island or whatever. You're not driving a Tesla. That's what it means to be poor, right? Obviously, I'm dramatizing it, but you get the point. Like, even a poor person is basically renting, maybe using like the subway or something. They're still relatively very comfortable. Like, they still have potable, drinkable water. They still get all sorts of types of food. I know people that basically have meat just once a month just because that's all they can afford. So this is what Sharia does. It makes a certain amount of our wealth the right of the poor people. Here there are more, virtues and advices that you find in Quran and Hadith regarding zakah. And there's just one that I want to focus on, and it's basically this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes people that hoard their wealth, right? الَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَها فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in very kind of sarcastic language, He says, فَبَشِّرْهُم بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Bashara in Arabic is used for glad tidings, for good news. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, give them good news of a very painful punishment, right? Those people that hold they hoard their wealth and they don't spend it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give them a glad tidings, give them good news that I'm going to punish them. And then He says, يَوْمَ يُحْمَى عَلَيْهَا. So this gold and silver that they're accumulating, this wealth that they're accumulating, it'll be uh, heated in the hellfire, and fatukwa biha jibahuhum wa junubuhum wa dhuhurum, that their foreheads and their flanks and their backs will basically be seared. Like, it'll be taken, that gold, and it'll be melted and basically poured on their bodies, right? And it'll be said to them, هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم. This is what you kept for yourself. So فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون. Again, ذاق in Arabic, it means basically to taste. Generally, it has a positive connotation, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using it here sarcastically, like, yeah, now taste what you hoarded. The conditions for zakah, number one, the person obviously has to be Muslim. So if a person is not Muslim, they don't have to pay zakah. Non-Muslim doesn't have zakah. Number two is that they have to be an adult. Generally, I would ask you this question, but this is maybe me speaking at you. So I'll just tell you what an adult is. It's basically a person who's baligh. It's not someone who's reached, 18 or 21 years old. Rather, it's somebody who's an adolescent who's hit puberty, basically. Number three, they have to be aqil, they have to be sane. An insane person does not have to pay zakah. And number four, they have to possess the a wealth that equals the nisab amount. What is the nisab amount? So for silver, the nisab amount is basically 612.36 grams, right? And for gold, it's 87.48 grams. So that's the actual amount that we find classically, that's found in hadith and also in the books of fiqh, right? So basically 200 dirhams, and in terms of gold it's 20 mithqal. That's what's mentioned in the books of fiqh. So we've converted that in grams because most of the world doesn't use the imperial system, they use the metric system. And then obviously you can probably guess that this value, it changes throughout the years. Every year the zakat amount will, or the gold amount will change, right? And the silver amount will change because the market value for gold and silver also keeps changing. And you have to, so that roughly, I haven't checked for today, but you can go online, darulfiqh.com, which is run by Mufti Faraz Adam, gives you actually the nisab amount for silver and for gold. Then the nisab amount should be owned for basically an entire lunar year. So basically, okay, so this is something that a lot of people get confused on. Everyone thinks, okay, 27th of Ramadan is when my zakat is due. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But the way actually zakat works is that the first time you ever own the amount of nisab, that's when your year starts. So let's say, for example, the first time you ever had a job, and you got your first paycheck, and that was like, $6,000, right? And you got it on March 31, let's say, or March 15. And so after you get paid, now you've owned the nisab amount. Then you look at your calendar, not the solar calendar, not the Gregorian calendar, but you look at the lunar calendar and you see what date that is, right? And so let's say, it tells you like XYZ, Sha'ban, whatever it is, right? Sha'ban 20th, let's say. So then next year on Sha'ban 20th, you also see at that point how much wealth you have, and we'll see exactly how to calculate your zakatable assets. You see how much you have on that day at Fajr time, right? This is how the nisab actually works. A lot of people, they'll think, if you okay, now if you forgot or if you didn't figure out at that time that that was your zakat year, that's fine. Set a date and then continue from there. That's fine. But I'm just letting you know what the official way is, as per the books of fiqh, right? So the first time you ever start owning the nisab amount, that's when it starts. In between, it can fluctuate. Like in between, you made your first paycheck, that was $6,000. You had bills, you paid it, whatever. You went down to 1,000, and the next month, you made some more money. So it can fluctuate. That's fine. You can even go below the nisab amount. That's still fine. On Sha'ban 20th, you will have to look again. Now, the only exception to that is if your wealth ever decreases to zero. If your net wealth, your net, basically possessions ever come to $0, that's when your cycle restarts. That's when your zakat cycle restarts. So that's basically how the nisab works. If you're confused about it, if you don't know exactly how it works, feel free to ask muftis. Okay, I explained the gold and silver in grams. Obviously, most people will pay its equivalent in cash. Some people ask this question, like some sisters or ladies, they have gold, but they don't really use it. It's kind of just sitting there. Is that zakatable? Yes, it's zakatable. Whether you use it or not, whether you wear it or not, it's still zakatable. You have to pay zakat on that. But somebody can ask, like, oh, maybe my mother or my, wife, she doesn't work. How's she gonna pay zakat? Well, I'm sure she has cash assets, or she can borrow cash assets and pay the zakat for that. You don't necessarily have to like cut out some of that gold and give like 2.5% in zakat. Rather, you can just give the cash amount for it. Okay, if you only possess gold and no other possessions, then use the gold nisab. If you possess mixed assets, generally the fatwa that we go with is silver nisab. That's more beneficial for the poor. Some ulama of our background, reliable ulama, the American Fiqh Academy run by Mufti Abrar Mirza, they, along with Mufti Saeed Palanpuri and Mufti Taqi Uthmani, upon their consultation, they went with the gold zakah for Nisab, that if you're facing difficulty and you can't, I mean, generally in North America, we're not facing difficulty and we should consider the right of the poor and we should go with the silver amount. But if somebody considers that, it's not something you can, refute them on or something. That's also an opinion. Uh, so the cycle of calculating zakat, I've explained it. Again, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, inshallah, in the chat. Okay, these are zakatable assets. I'll add some more to these. So you have gold and silver, obviously, these are zakatable. Then you have cash, right? Business stock. Business stock basically includes any kind of stocks that you own. Same thing if you own cryptocurrency for the sake of like trading, that also counts as business stock, and you'll have to give zakat on that as well. Um, then agricultural produce. I'm assuming most of us don't own agricultural produce here, but that's also zakatable. Animals and livestock. So if you have like sheep or camels or whatever, then you also have to give zakat on those. I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that you guys don't own those. Non-zakatable items, jewelry besides gold and silver. So if you have like platinum or you have diamonds and things like that, maybe you're sitting on a stash of diamonds sitting at home, mashallah, good for you. But that's not zakatable, right? There's one thing that I'll add, inshallah, related to nisab actually. So this is something really important. We're gonna see if you look here, you have zakatable assets. You might feel like, okay, I don't have gold, I don't have silver, I don't have cash, I don't own business stocks, but you have jewelry, like diamonds and whatnot, that are maybe worth like thousands of dollars. So there's actually two types of nisab. One nisab that I mentioned is called nisabu wujub zakah. So if you own that nisab, now you have to pay zakat. But there's another nisab called nisabu hirman is zakat, which means that even though you might not have to pay zakat, but you also cannot receive zakat. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's say somebody in cash assets, they only have like $100, right? They don't have any gold, they don't have any silver, they don't own any, stocks. So now they don't have to pay zakat. However, they own three homes, right? So now their first home will be a necessity, but everything beyond that is now not a necessity. So you you evaluate those as well, and at that point, that person cannot receive zakat anymore because obviously that's worth a lot more than the nisab of zakat, right? So that's nisab of hirman is zakat. This person also cannot receive zakat. So why am I mentioning all this? Because a lot of poor people in that standard is actually not poor. They're actually not poor. You might even find people back home. They'll be like, oh, this person they can't, they're in need and they need money, this and that. But they own properties. They own properties beyond that which they're living on. So like they might own some, farming land. They might own like other homes, rental properties, whatever. And if they own that, then at that point they actually cannot receive zakat either. Although they don't have to give zakat because they don't have that kind of cash or that kind of gold, but they also cannot receive zakat. So this is something to be very careful about. Okay, cars and all vehicles, those are not zakatable. Properties, if you own like 10 homes, again, good for you, but those are not zakatable. The only exception for this is if you're flipping houses, then those become business stock. If you basically if you're in the business of buying homes, working on them or getting contractors to work on them and then reselling, then all of these homes become business assets, and those now become zakatable. You have to see what the market value is, combine it, and then pay 2.5% of that. Otherwise, if you just have like 10 properties sitting there, even if it's rental properties, you only have to pay zakat on the cash amount that obviously gets saved up, but the properties themselves are not zakatable. Again, properties on lease, so electronic appliances, household appliances, those are not zakatable. However, remember for hirmanu zakat, like if you're not eligible to take zakat, you would evaluate things like extra computers or laptops, or like having like a 65-inch TV. If you have all of those and somebody has all of these and they go around crying around that, oh, I'm a very poor person, I can't afford anything, then obviously you cannot give them zakat because they have things that are beyond their necessities, excess beyond their necessities, and despite that, they can just sell those and obviously go on buying food and so on and so forth. Okay, These are different types of gold. I'm actually not going to go through them. If you have these type of golds like white gold and pink gold and so on and so forth, then let us know inshallah on the Ask Mufti chat, and we'll answer those questions. Those are very specific to maybe very few people. Zakat on business stock. So commodities refer to those items that are purchased with the intention of resale. So if you own a store, or if you own a restaurant, or if you own, basically you're buying and selling things, all of those things are business stocks, and you have to evaluate them, the market value, and or actually, sorry, the retail price, and you have to pay that 2.5% of that in zakat. So, zakat is not compulsory on real estate purchased with the intention to lease out. I already mentioned that, right? And also, you will add that to your cash assets, your gold and silver assets, and then see 2.5% out of that. Anything that is partnership, like if you own a store, you own 50%, another person owns 50%, you're only liable to pay zakat for 50% of whatever the company owns, and the other person has to pay the other 50%. Okay, again, these are okay. I'll go through some of these because these might actually be some things that people fall in. Ijara and diminishing musharaka. If you're on Islamic finance, these are two models of Islamic financing. Ijara is basically rent to own. That's the scheme in very like short form. I'm summarizing it. Diminishing musharaka basically means that it's a model of Islamic financing. You pay a down payment. Let's say the home was 500,000. You pay 100,000. So you own 20%. The company owns the Islamic financing company owns 80%. And as you keep paying them monthly, then it becomes a diminishing partnership. Like they now start owning 79%, 78%. So on and so forth until you paid off the entire amount and you become the 100% owner. So these are not considered debt. So basically, no future payments can be deducted from zakatable assets because remember, the way you calculate your zakat is you add your cash, your gold, your silver, business stocks, whatever else, and then you start deducting liabilities. So stuff that you owe. If you owe people money, and we'll go more into debts and see what can actually be counted as liabilities. So basically, in short form, if you owe people and anything that's due within 12 lunar months, that will be calculated as liabilities. Deposits, money that's deposited for safekeeping or given to another party is also zakatable. So let's say you were holding, $5,000 cash, but you weren't sure, if somebody was going to steal it from you, so you give it to your friend to hold on to it. That's zakatable. When your zakat time comes, you have to pay that. Down payments, right? So any person who pays a down payment is not subject to zakat because that's not yours anymore. Insurance premiums, zakat is also not payable on insurance premiums because again, that's money that you're giving away. Okay, in terms of debts, uh, if you ever loan somebody or you lend some amount to a person, like let's say, your friend came and they're like, "Oh, I need $2,000," and you give them that amount as qard, as a loan. When your zakat time comes, you actually do have to pay zakat on that amount, even though you don't have it. And the reason for this is there's a small exception to this, which is basically if the person just ghosted you, they're like, "Yeah, I know we're really good friends, but thank you for the money. I'm leaving now, right? I'm leaving the country or something." So if that happens, then and there's no hope of you ever getting it back, then that's not zakatable anymore. But if you have a hope of getting it back, let's say in 10 years, right, 15 years, you still have to pay zakat on that because that is still your property. Okay, there are two types of debts, weak debts. So this refers to receivables that happen without an exchange of tangible goods. A strong debt is like something that, let's say you buy a car and now you owe the person money for buying that car, right? You're financing it or something. But a weak debt is something that happens in exchange of an intangible thing. So, for example, an employee's unpaid wages, right? Let's say you're an employer and you owe your employee some money, that's not in exchange of something tangible. Unpaid rental, same thing. Outstanding mahr, right? Like let's say you got so happy when you got married and you're like, I'm gonna give you 100K mahr. I don't know why you did that, but let's say you did that. This is also not in exchange of something tangible, so that's a weak debt as well. What's the ruling on weak debt? Zakat is not compulsory on weak debt receivable until somebody gets it. So you promised your wife 100,000 in mahr. Until she actually gets that amount, she doesn't have to give zakat on it. Remember, we talked about debts, right? If you lend somebody an amount, you have to give zakat on that. But your wife actually does not have to pay zakat on that amount because she doesn't have it yet, and it's not in exchange of something tangible. Zakat is not compulsory on such a debt. For the previous years, it was outstanding. Obviously, when you get it, then you have to give zakat. A bad debt, I already went over this. If the person who took the money, they acknowledge that, yeah, I do owe you some money, then you have to pay that amount, right? However many years they pay you back, and you still have to pay that amount. But if somebody says, no, I don't remember, you paid me $2,000, I have no idea. So in that case, that zakat you don't have to give. You don't have to give zakat on that amount. I talked about the 12 months. This is basically where that comes up. If you owe somebody, let's say for example, somebody's went to the bank, and through the conventional, mortgaging system, they bought a house, and they're like, oh look, I'm hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, so therefore I don't have to pay zakat. This is completely wrong. You can only, for any debt, you can only calculate a 12 months worth of what you have to pay. That's basically your liabilities. Shares. So there are obviously two types. Some people they do like long-term investment in shares. Some people they trade. Anything that a person trades, all of that amount that you own on the day that your zakat is due, all that amount actually is zakatable. If it is just to hold as an investment, like you like some company, I don't know, GameStop or something, and you purchase stocks, and you have it for like years, right? Maybe someday you'll resell it, maybe you won't, whatever. Then you only have to pay zakat on dividends. You don't have to pay zakat. You don't have to pay zakat on the entire amount. So number one, obviously dividends, and also if that company, GameStop or whatever, they have commodities that they're selling. So you have to see how much the entire company, its net worth, how much of it is actually commodities, what percentage, and then what percentage of the company do you own, and then from that percentage. So there's three numbers that you have to get. One is the company's total assets. Number two, how much of the company's total assets are their commodities, right? And then from that amount, you have to see how much you own, like what's your ratio as a shareholder. Let's say you own 1%, which is actually pretty big. Let's say you own 1%, then you take the 2.5% out of that 1%. So that's basically how you pay zakat on stocks if you're only investing and you're not day trading or something. Or I wouldn't say day trading, actually, trading. Day trading is actually not permissible. Okay, pension schemes. This is 401ks. In UK, they call it pension schemes. 401ks are zakatable as well. There's a very well-known Sheikh, Joe Bradford. I don't know if you know Sheikh Joe Bradford. He says that it's not zakatable. That's completely wrong. The thing with 401ks is that you have to pay a penalty if you withdraw it. However, you can withdraw it. The shart, the condition, the precondition for something being zakatable is number one, you own it. Number two, you're able to do tasarruf on it. You're able to spend it. 401k amount, you can actually spend it. You're allowed to. There's very, very rare 401k schemes where you're not allowed to spend anything of it. If you withdraw it, you lose everything. But majority of cases, people actually can withdraw it. They'll just get taxed, and they'll be liable to penalties. Now, the question would be, should they do that? They don't necessarily need to do that because money is something that is liquid, right? So, therefore, you just take the value of your 401k and you pay in cash. You just pay the amount in cash. Same thing with gold. Like, nobody gives actual gold in zakat, right? You give the cash value. So, some people will have, like, silly objections. They'll say, oh, yeah, I'll have to pay all these penalties, this and that, why are you making deen hard? Nobody's asking anybody to liquidate any of their 401ks. All you got to do is pay from your cash. Oh, sure. This is on agricultural produce. If any of you own agricultural land, let us know. But we're not going to go over that over here. Animals and livestock. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that you don't own camels and sheep and goats in New York City. If you do, good for you. Again, paying zakat. Okay, this is, I think, some of the most important part. The intention has to be made at the time of separating your assets. Like when you've calculated, then you say, okay, I owe, let's say, $1,000 in zakat, and you separate that, and you make the intention, I'll give it to a poor person, right? Again, you can give it to organizations that do give it to poor people, as long as you make the intention when giving it to them that this is zakat amount that's meant for poor people. Um, you're also allowed to pay on behalf of your spouse and children. Just make the intention for it. It's always better that a person pays their own zakat. There's more barakah in that. Again, remember tamlik, that it has to be you cannot transfer like salary or something that you owe a person. It has to be extra money that you give them that was your zakat amount, and there cannot be any kind of restriction or condition attached with it. You have to give them the money and they do whatever they want with it. Yeah, these are the avenues of zakah. Who can you give zakat to? Number one, you have the poor and needy. There's a difference between poor and needy, fuqara and masakin. A faqir is a person who does not have the zakat amount and they're eligible for zakat. Remember the hirman zakat discussion that I brought up earlier? So a person who is eligible to receive zakat. Miskin is a person that has zero, that has absolutely nothing. So that's the difference between the two. And so you can give them zakat. Number two is a person who is in debt. So how does this work? Basically, let's say you have, some uncle in your society that is like, large debts that they have to pay off. The only time you can give them zakat is when they add their total assets, like zakatable assets, and then they minus their liabilities, so what they owe to people, and the net amount comes down to something that is less than the nisab amount. So let's say you owe somebody $15,000, right? But your cash assets is $150,000. You cannot take zakat to pay off that loan, because if you minus your $15,000 from your total assets, then it's not going to be the less than the nisab amount. So that's basically how that works. Travelers, this is kind of a non-existent thing now. Everyone has access to ATMs, but traveler basically refers to a person who was traveling, doesn't have access to their money, and they're in some random country, and basically they cannot spend because they don't have their wealth with them that's sitting at home. But nowadays everyone has access to ATMs and so on and so forth. So generally this issue does not arise. Fi sabilillah, this is referring to the mujahideen who are needy. Unfortunately, you have modern organization nowadays. I'm not going to name them, but they're very, very well known. You will see it when the month of Ramadan comes. They will all start coming. They say that for organizations or for schools, you can give zakat directly to the school. This is completely wrong. There is a way that can be done. Our madaris generally do that. Is basically they might have students that are needy, and so they do tamlik to those students. Like you can give zakat, and they'll give it to those students. So that's how that works. But you cannot, for example, directly just pay it to some hospital or some kind of organization or whatever. Mu'allafatul qulub, this used to be back in the days, this stopped in the time of Umar radiallahu anh, but zakat used to be allowed for the people that had just recently accepted Islam. Zakat collectors, this is not referring to HHRD or ICNA relief or whatever. That's not what this is referring to. This basically is somebody under the Khilafah that the Khalifa or the Hakim has appointed them as a zakat collector. Their salary can be paid from the zakat amount. Unfortunately, nowadays you have organizations, lots of organizations that will take large sums from zakat as salaries. So I'm not going to name, but there's a corporation recently, their CEO was getting paid $170,000, all taken from zakat, unfortunately, right? So this is obviously not justified. When you give your zakat and you want to give it to an organization, please see that they have 100% donation policy, that they give 100% to poor people. If they use sadaqah to pay the salaries, that's fine, but zakat can absolutely not be used for any kind of salary. Okay, the following you cannot give zakat to general welfare projects, hospitals, madrasa. So I explained how the madrasa works, right? Like some madaris will have, orphans, or they'll have poor students, and basically tamlik goes to those students. So that would work. Construction project for mosques, hospitals, and so on and so forth. The descendants of Al-Abbas, Harith, Ja'far, and Aqil, these are basically Sadat. They're Sayyids. They cannot take zakat. This comes in hadith as well. A rich person, obviously, somebody we talked about this, right? Someone who is beyond nisab al-hirman is zakat. You cannot give your own wife or husband zakat. That would be very convenient, right? Your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, so anything that goes above, you cannot give them zakat. Children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, you can't give them zakat. However, your siblings, you can. As a matter of fact, the fuqaha write that if they are needy, then they are actually ahaq. They are, they are, they have the most. So let's say you have relatives, cousins, or whatever, back home or wherever that have a need, you can give them zakat. Obviously, just make sure that they don't have extra assets like TVs or extra TVs or like extra cars just lying around, then they wouldn't be able to take zakat. Although they wouldn't have to give zakat, they also cannot take zakat. Non-Muslim, we talked about this already, and so on and so forth. Okay, inshallah. So that brings my part to an end. If you have any questions regarding zakat, inshallah, you can ask. Yeah, if you own multiple properties, no, there's no zakat on the properties themselves unless you're flipping the houses. Then that becomes business assets and you have to pay zakat. Can zakat be paid in any amount, or does it have to be a certain amount? It's 2.5%. We mentioned that, right? After basically you add your gold amount, your silver, whatever silver you own, cash assets, your crypto if you're trading that, any kind of business stock, you add all of that, and then you minus any kind of debt that you had that's payable within the next 12 months, 12 lunar months, and then you see what's the amount, and that's your net zakatable amount. 2.5% from that. Why does ICNA give zakat to LGBT if we can't give zakat to non-Muslims? I guess you gotta ask them that. But we covered today who you can give zakat and who you cannot give zakat to. You can give zakat to orphan cousins. You can, yes. If they have like TV and things like that, then see what the value of just estimate what the value of the TV is. If the value of the TV is like more than the nisab amount, then that's something. Basically, what it is hawa'ij asliya, the fuqaha what they write, because or else people will take advantage of the zakat process, right? Like what you can do is buy like two cars and say, oh, I have no cash, so give me zakat. To be safe, if we pay more than the calculated, yeah, that's completely fine. If you pay more than what is due for your zakat, that's completely fine. Allah will reward you for that, inshallah. Okay, inshallah. So we'll bring this to an end. If you have any more questions, the Ask Mufti chat, feel free to ask on there, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inshallah, Mufti Ubaidullah will continue.
sorry. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, that it is the month of Ramadan in which Allah ta'ala revealed the Quran. That's number one. Number two, Allah ta'ala describes why Ramadan is so important by saying, this Quran, which was revealed in the month of Ramadan, هُدًى لِلنَّاسِ وَبَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْهُدَى وَالْفُرْقَانِ, it is a guide for mankind, and it is a book that differentiates between the right and wrong. So, first point to remember and note is that this is a month in which we have to build an attachment with the Quran. to build an attachment with the Quran, the very simple way to do so is to try and fulfill the 5 rights of the Quran. What are the 5 rights? Right number 1 is a person learns to read the Quran correctly with tajweed. That is one of the huquq, one of the rights that the Quran has upon us. Right number 2 is to memorize the Quran. Right number 3 is that a person understands the meaning of the Quran. Right number 4, person contemplates tadabbur, contemplates over the message of the Quran. Right number 5 is a person practices upon the message and the lessons from the Quran. And of course, when we practice, then we also, as a ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have the responsibility to teach it to other people. So that is point number 1. Point number 2, what is the most important factor of Ramadan? Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who believe, Allah Ta'ala has ordained fasting upon you like He had ordained fasting upon the people before you, so that you may gain taqwa. Taqwa is what we call Allah consciousness. For example, if a person is sitting inside his room holding onto his phone and he has access to wherever he wants to go on his phone, then what is stopping that person from texting someone, from typing someone, from going into a website which is not good for his deen, which is not good for himself? What is stopping that person from doing so? It is nothing but taqwa. So if we look at the things in this world which has value, the most valuable asset which a person can have is taqwa. And it is fasting that will allow us to create this taqwa. And most importantly, we have to remember the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is Buniya al-Islamu ala khamsin. Islam's foundation is based upon 5 pillars, and we know one of them is Sawm. And which fasting are we talking about? The fasting in the month of Ramadan. So may Allah give us tawfiq to fast in the month of Ramadan, fulfilling the rights of the fast. As-sawmu junnatun ma lam yukhraq. Fasting is a shield as long as a person does not break the fast, which means as long as a person does not commit any shameful act, any haram act, does not earn haram, does not go to haram places, and he does not do a sin like talking evil, cursing someone, doing ghiba, backbiting, etc. Then Allah Ta'ala will protect that fast. So keeping this in mind, what we need to do is now try to figure out how to motivate ourselves for fasting. We should have done so from the month of Sha'ban or even from the month of Rajab, but even if we haven't done so, there is still time. The easiest way to do that would be that we can make it a point. We can make it a point of reciting from a book called The Virtues of Ramadan. And every day, maybe before we break our fast, we can spend 15-20 minutes and go over some of the virtues and rewards of that. That will inshallah motivate us to make utilization of our fast most appropriate, inshallah. Now I'm going to go through a few points of Ramadan. One is the definition, what is the intention, what are the mustahab acts, what is makruh, invalidators, non-invalidators, and some Q&A, and who are exempt, and du'as. So let's go on to what is the definition of fasting. In the Arabic text, the definition of fasting is to abstain. In Sharia, it means to abstain from dawn to sunset. Dawn means from the break of dawn, not from sunrise. Some people make a mistake. It's from dawn. When the break of dawn is basically the time that Fajr time comes in. So we have to abstain from food, drink, and intercourse. This is the physical abstination, and the spiritual abstination is from all types of sin. What is the intention of fasting? Nothing but gaining the proximity of Allah. That should be the only intention. Next question, who has to fast? Fasting in the month of Ramadan is obligatory farad for every adult male, female, who is physically and mentally healthy and who is not necessarily traveling at that moment. Then, fasting is not farad upon children, number 1. Number 2, fasting is not farad on those who are mentally unstable. Number 3, fasting is not farad on those who have chronic illnesses or illness which does not allow them to fast. Intention. The general principle is intention has to be made before each fast for it to count. It is necessary to make an intention every day. If a person stays awake from all these things we have discussed above without the intention, even then the fast will not be valid. At least mentally, even if we don't physically say it, we have to have this intention that inshallah I will fast tomorrow or today if I'm doing sahri in the morning. What time should we make the intention? the time for intention starts from Maghrib of the night before and will last all the way till what we call the Dahwatul Kubra, which is the midday of the following day. For example, let's say Ahmad Muhammad wants to fast on a Monday, for example, or Tuesday. He can make his intention from Monday Maghrib all the way until the midday, basically on Tuesday. How do we explain midday? Let's say Fajr starts at 4 a.m. and Maghrib starts at 9 p.m. Well, this was based on the UK example, but anyway, so if we do 4 to 9, how many hours? The exact middle point of the day would be 12, for example. Why? Because it's 17 hours from Fajr to Maghrib. So the midday would be exactly 50% of 50 point in between, which is 8.5. Now, question: if Ahmed woke up to eat his sahri, however, when he was eating his sahri, he forgot to make the intention, will his fast be valid? The answer is yes, because when a person is having sahri, that naturally means that he is planning on fasting. That is exactly why he woke up for fasting. What are the mustahab actions in fasting? Number one is to hasten to open the fast, to delay the suhoor right until Fajr time comes in. So usually we use the 18-degree time to be safer, which is another discussion we can have on the groups, inshallah. And to place the right hand over the left hand in salah. Well, that is not related to fasting though. What is the best time to have sahri? Zayd ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would stand to offer salah after eating his food, and the timing between the start of Fajr and when the Prophet would stop eating was equivalent to the recitation of 50 verses of the Quran, small verses. Anas radiallahu anhu reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would break his dates with fresh dates. So people ask that, what should I eat in my during my breaking the fast? So if we have dates, then we should prefer dates over anything else. If a person is unable to get fresh or dried dates, then he may break his fast with sips of water. What are the makruh acts or detestable actions of fasting? Chewing gum, plastic items, or anything else which doesn't have a taste, to collect one's saliva in the mouth and then swallowing it to quench the thirst, to delay a bath that has become farad upon one person until all the way till Fajr time, to use toothpaste or tooth powder even if a person is not swallowing them, to use it during fasting is also makruh, detestable. To complain of hunger and thirst, to take water so much up the nostril during wudu that it almost reaches the almost goes into the head. Remember, if it goes into the throat, the fast will actually break. To gargle unnecessarily, to argue and use filthy or indecent words. This will actually take away the ruhaniyat, the power from the fast. To backbite, to speak a lie, and to swear are sinful acts even when one is not fasting. Therefore, they become even worse when when a person is fasting. Yes, we can take a Maghrib break. Let me just double check to see when is Maghrib time coming in. There is, okay, let's take a break, inshallah, and we will restart in about 10 minutes, inshallah, okay? Inshallah. Give another minute we'll give another minute for the brothers and sisters to come back, inshallah. So we were talking about, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We were talking about the detestable actions during fasting. So going back, or just remember, fasting is one of the most fundamentally important actions of Ramadan. And the amount of reward that a person gets for fasting is also beyond imagination. Just to get an understanding, there is a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which mentions that for every son of Adam, basically for every child of Adam, he has an allocation of reward for every action that he does. That means the allocation is such that the angels who are writing our deeds on our right and left side, they know the amount. But it is only when it comes to fasting that these angels are unable to calculate, which is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "As-sawmu li wa ana ajzi bih," that fasting is for me and I am the one that is going to give its recompense. So coming back, so we described to complain of hunger and thirst. These are detestable actions during fasting. We don't want to fast and end up without the amount of reward we were expecting. Pulling the water too deep into the nose, gargling more than necessary, to argue with someone, to get into a fight with someone, and to use filthy and indecent language, especially slang language or foul language or cussing. And most importantly, one of the worst types of crime is to backbite, to tell a lie, to swear. These are sinful acts even when one is not fasting. Then imagine if one is fasting, how much worse it becomes. And there is actually um, the experience of many pious people of the past where they have said that we have seen people who abstain from sin during fasting. We have seen that their fasting physically becomes extremely easy. And those people we have seen that who use any of these, do any of these detestable actions during fasting, then their fasting also becomes extremely difficult. And we know the story of two sahabiyat in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who had ended up having a very hard time fasting, and they sought permission to break their fast. Prophet ﷺ, instead of giving them permission, told them to vomit. And when they vomited, it showed that pieces of meat came out of their stomach. So both of the ladies were pretty surprised because they hadn't eaten meat that day. Then Rasulullah ﷺ explained that when the verse of the Quran which says that ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يؤكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه. Would you, any of you, like to eat the dead meat of your deceased brother? So backbiting is worse than that. So that was a miracle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the ladies, even though they hadn't eaten meat, they were able to see meat. Where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam connected that with the with the verse of the Quran which mentions that backbiting someone is like eating the dead meat of a dead brother. So may Allah Ta'ala protect us. So again, so to backbite, tell a lie, and swear are sinful acts even when one is not fasting. They become even worse when one is fasting. Now we're going to go straight into the invalidators. So how does a fast become beautiful and very physically comfortable? Is when a person abstains from sin during fasting. The things which invalidate the fast. Okay. For something to invalidate a fast, it has to meet two conditions. Condition number one, it has a possibility of reaching the stomach or brain. It has a possibility of reaching the stomach or brain. Number two, it enters the body through the mouth, nose, or anus, which are the normal channels to enter into the stomach. There are two types of invalidators. One is invalidators which necessitate only a qada. Qada means makeup. The second type of invalidators are those which necessitate a qada and a kafara. Kafara is basically a fine. Now let's talk about oral invalidators. If you can see the picture here, it shows a few points on the throat. Anything which passes the nasal or oral passage and then goes down the throat breaks the fast. It goes down the throat, it breaks the fast. That is the general principle of the invalidators which are through the mouth or the nose. Now, the invalidators of fasting, which only necessitate a qada, which is a makeup, if a person eats or drinks accidentally whilst conscious of fasting, his fast will break and will have to do qada only. I'm going to explain what does that mean. That means a person was eating or drinking. Basically, the Maghrib adhan was not yet called. The adhan, because in America you don't hear the adhan usually. So the adhan was not called. However, the sky seemed to become dark due to rain maybe or clouds. And the person said, oh, it's so late, maybe Maghrib time came in. And he started eating thinking that it was already Maghrib time, right? Number two, a person was eating his suhoor, was eating sahri, and he wasn't sure or not if Fajr time came in, so kept on eating. After he finished eating, he realized that Fajr time had come in already 5 minutes ago, for example. Or a person was fasting, and then suddenly in the middle of the day, he completely forgetfully ate something. After eating something, he was like, oh, I was fasting, but I ate. So it seems like my fast was broken. And then he ate deliberately, thinking that the previous food had broken his fast. So in these three scenarios, a person will have to make up for that fast only after Ramadan ends, but he will not have to pay the fine or give the kafara. We'll explain the kafara in a bit. Now, these continuing of those which only necessitate a qada. We're still talking about the mouth and the throat or something through the nose also. If a person swallows a pebble or any other item which a person wouldn't typically eat, because it has crossed the throat, remember the principle, if it crosses the throat, then it will necessitate qada. Swallowing water by accident when gargling for wudu or ghusl, with the exception of water that remains in the mouth. For example, A person was making wudu, and accidentally he has a habit of gargling. Of course, during fasting we say don't really gargle unless you really have to. Don't gargle during fasting because that fear is always there. So a person, due to his old habit, he was gargling whilst making wudu, and water went through his throat. That would necessitate a qada only, not a kafara. However, another question people usually ask is, what if that after I finished washing my mouth during fasting and then I went to perform my salah, but the water that I used to wash my mouth, maybe a little bit of that wetness remain inside my mouth. If I swallow that wetness through my saliva, will my fast break? No, your fast will not break. So, swallowing blood that exits from the gums and is more than the amount of saliva, that is a general rule, that how much blood does breaks the wudu. If a person spits and there is more blood than the saliva, then we will say that a person should repeat the wudu again. Similarly, because that saliva broke the wudu, if someone was to swallow that saliva, it will break his fast. Swallowing toothpaste or mouthwash. Remember, we mentioned that it is detestable to use toothpaste or mouthwash during fasting, but it doesn't break the fast unless it is swallowed. So if a person swallows these two, then also he will have to do qada after Ramadan. Deliberately swallowing vomit that reaches a mouthful. Remember, the condition is a mouthful. If a person just had a small burp and something came out and then he swallowed it immediately, that would not break the fast. But if it was a full mouth vomit and a person swallowed that again, it would break his fast. Vomiting and then thinking that the fast is broken and to deliberately vomit again. So first a person vomited the small amount, but then he was like, oh, I vomited, so maybe my fast is broken. And then he vomited again full mouth deliberately, forcefully. Then it will necessitate a qada. Let's talk about the nose. Water used to clean the nose for wudu or ghusl, but somehow a person sniffed it so hard it reached his throat or his brain. Or a person inhaled medicine into the nostrils. Like for example, um, uh, like 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 um like a nose medicine or any other medicine that goes in through the nose. For example, an asthma patient, if some type of inhaler is given to him, where it's put on his top of his mouth, but he's inhaling it through his nose, and actual medicine is going through his nose. The reason being is when actual medicine goes in through our nose, it actually crosses our throat. So crossing the throat invalidates the fast. Inhaling smoke by our own doing. For example, suppose I'm like, okay, smoking, of course, it's makruh tahrimi, almost haram, even outside Ramadan. But if a person is saying, oh, I'm fasting, so I can't smoke, so he lights the smoke and then he keeps it close to his nose just to inhale. So that would break the fast and would necessitate a qada because the actual tobacco is directly being pulled into his nose. If a person was walking down the street and then dust came and then he non-deliberately inhaled the dust, even though it went in through his throat, it was done undeliberately, so fast will not break. But if a person deliberately sniffs any type of particle, like medication or smoke, which has a particle inside, and it goes into the throat or crosses the throat, the fast will break. Now, what action necessitates not only a qada but a kafara as well? Okay, in principle, if a person purposely breaks his fast in Ramadan without a valid Shari'i reason, through eating, drinking, or engaging in intercourse, then he will have to make up the broken fast after the month of Ramadan and also observe the kafara. That is the general principle. So remember this. We said purposely, and what are the three main things? Eating, drinking, or engaging in intercourse with the spouse. How to fulfill the kafara? The way the kafara works in Sharia is the person has to fast for 60 days consecutively. Consecutively means 2 full months. If the 60 days of fast are not kept consecutively, a person will have to restart the countdown all over again. Now, probably a question that's arising is a sister might say that, okay, but every month for a certain number of days, I am unable to fast. So if I'm doing my kafara, what do I do in those days? If a sister is experiencing menstruation during these days, due to which she is unable to fast, then it will not be regarded as discontinuity, which means that she will count her 60 days minus the 14 days. So she will fast right up to the day in which her cycle starts. and then she will wait until the cycle ends, and immediately, as soon as the cycle ends, she will restart the fast without giving any break in between. If she does so for 60 days, inshallah, 2 months basically, her kafara will have been fulfilled. Now, the second point is if a person, for whatever reason, for example, physical illness, for example, chronic illness, for example, extreme weakness, health reasons, if a person is unable to do these 60 fasts as a kafara, then they will be required to feed 60 poor people 2 meals a day, or one person 2 meals a day for 60 days. So either we have to feed two meal for a day to 60 people, or one person 2 meals for 60 days. It should be noted that the above mentioned is the order in which a person will have to give his kafara. If a person is incapable of observing number one, which is 60 consecutive fasts due to illness or old age, chronic illness, because other illnesses will become well and a person becomes healthy again, then the kafara may be fulfilled through the second method. So if a person is able to do so through the first method, the second method would not count. Okay. Uh, let's talk about qada, then kafara. A person will do qada of the fast he broke first, and then start the 60 days of kafara. Therefore, in total, he will fast for 61 days, right? 1 day for the qada, and the 60 days for kafara. Fine. 1 day qada for the broken, and 60 days. Anyway, there's a question here. What if a person broke multiple fasts, not one? Then first he will make up all the multiple fasts he had broken in Ramadan, and then do one kafara that would suffice for all. That would suffice as a fine, basically. Let's talk about the things which don't invalidate: eating, drinking forgetfully, swallowing one's own saliva, sniffing of mucus which came from inside, inhaling smoke or dust unintentionally, starting the fast in a state of major ritual impurity, means in need of a ghusl, injections, whether it's blood transfusion, kidney dialysis, glucose, or saline drips. These will not invalidate the fast. Similarly, blood test or cupping, or blood extraction, tooth extraction, as long as medicine does not go down the throat. Inhaling oxygen, like for example, using a CPAP machine, as long as it's only air and no other medication is connected. Using a miswak, as long as the miswak bristles are not swallowed. Swimming or submerging one's body into the water, as long as water is not swallowed. Tasting food, it is detestable, but it does not break the fast as long as it is not swallowed. Nicotine patches will not break the fast. Okay. Let's talk about vomiting. If a person vomits, then when will the fast break? Here are the points. Point number one returns and swallows the vomit down the throat. One vomits a mouthful intentionally. I'm saying it again. Suppose a person vomited full mouth and he swallowed that vomit. It will break his fast. If a person without intentionally vomited a full mouth, intentionally, then also the fast will break. If fast is broken, that means that if a person unintentionally vomited full mouth, it will not break the fast. If fast is broken by vomiting, then qada is only necessary, not kafara. Fast does not break by non-deliberate vomiting. Deliberate vomiting less than a mouthful also does not break the fast. When does a person decide whether my vomit was mouthful or not? The definition of mouthful vomiting is that which one cannot hold back in one's mouth without difficulty. A little amount of vomit went up my throat, then as a reflex, I swallowed it back, for example. Does it break my fast? The answer is no. Can I swallow bits of food left between the teeth? For example, I was eating chicken or steak and some of that got stuck in my teeth. If I swallow that steak after sahri, would my wudu with my fasting break? Here's a quick answer. If the particle that was stuck in my teeth is smaller than the size of a chickpea, the fast will be valid. However, if something is equals or bigger than the size of a chickpea, then the fast will become invalid and qada will be necessary, not kafara. If food left between the teeth is taken out of the mouth and then it is swallowed, it will break the fast. We're talking about food that was stuck inside and a person swallowed the thing inside his mouth, not something which he took out and put it back in. Question: eardrops and eye drops, do they break the fast? Answer: no. the fast will remain valid. So eardrops and eye drops will will not cause fast to break. There's only one point here to mention. Eye drops will not break the fast in any circumstances, but eardrops, there is usually a layer in the ear, which is known as the covering of the eardrum. So usually, if that layer is intact and has not been broken, then a person is fine. But if that layer is broken, then there's a possibility the medicine in the nose could go straight into the throat. So a person has to be careful there. Okay, nasal spray. Remember, if a person uses a nasal spray, his fast will break because the nasal spray is designed that when a person sniffs it, it goes straight into the brain or into the throat. What is the solution? Consult a doctor or your doctor and ask whether the same medication can be applied by means of a cotton swab to the inner linings of the nose. In this manner, the medication will reach the nose but will not traverse beyond the nasal tissue. This is an area that the medication can be applied without breaking your fast. Tooth extracts and dental treatments. Provided that water or any of the liquids do not go down the throat, the fast is not invalidated. It is advised to be cautious and schedule appointments outside of fasting hours if possible. We understand there could be an emergency, so even in a case of an emergency, just make sure it does not go down the throat. Aerosol sprays is basically air sprays that a person squeeze into the air. Remember, aerosol sprays have a defined body due to the vapor it contains. If one is not cautious while applying these sprays, then it could go down the throat, and if it does go down the throat, it will break one's fast. So it will fall under the category of deliberately sniffing in something with a particle. If someone else is spraying and the vapor does go down your throat while you did not intend to inhale, your fast will not break. One should exercise caution in using any substance that may jeopardize one's fast. So if we are in an area where there are these type of particles, it's better to wear a mask so that we don't inhale anything of that sort. And it's best to avoid these type of sprays during fasting and use preferably the oil-based perfumes. Smoking. Remember, smoking cigarettes, shisha, or any other items will break one's fast. Qada will be necessary, not kafara. Let's talk about asthma pump. Yes, using an asthma pump while fasting will break the fast. However, only qada will be necessary, not kafara. So a person might say that, but it's an emergency. Yes, if a person cannot fast at all without using an asthma, he may use it and perform qada later on in those days of the year when the days are smaller, or in those days when he does not have to use a pump. Like for example, in summer, asthma patient usually does not have to use his pump in summer, so he can make up those fast in those days. However, if a person is incapable of performing qada later, due to the fact that he's using the asthma pump every few hours, every single day of his life, then he can pay fidya. What is the fidya? Fidya is the amount that we give as sadaqatul fitr. The minimum amount this year, 2024, in New York is $8. So that will be due in lieu of every missed fast for such a person who cannot fast due to this such type of chronic illness. Now, injections. We already talked about it. It does not break the fast, right? So injections do not break the fast. Now, if a person is menstruating in Ramadan, what do they do? This is pretty important. The Aisha radiallahu anha reports that Rasulullah that she mentions regarding herself that we used to pass through the month of Ramadan in a period of menstruation. However, we were commanded, of course, by Rasulullah to complete the fast later, but we were not completed to order to complete the salah. That means in the days of menstruation, a sister does not have to make up the salah missed, but the fasts that were due, they would have to make up later on, whether it was due to menstruation or whether it was due to childbirth. A woman may experience the following three situations in Ramadan in regards to the menstruation. Number one, Ramadan began in the state that she was in her monthly cycle. In that case, she may eat in a manner that no fasting person sees her eating. Especially when we are living in a family and we have brothers or other siblings, they do not understand this. If they see us eating, then they will say, but it's unfair. How could she eat and I cannot eat? So just be careful. Number two, the menstruation starts during the day. That means we were fasting in the month of Ramadan, and one of the days it suddenly started. In that case, she must eat in a manner that no fasting person sees her. It is incorrect to refrain from eating to create a likeness with those who are fasting, right? So she should eat. In this situation, she should eat. Third situation, her menstruation came to a stop in the middle of the fasting day. In this case, she should, or we can say she must conduct herself like a fasting person and abstain from eating, drinking, and intimacy for the remainder of that particular day until basically iftar time, which is Maghrib. Now, question: does a nursing woman need to fast? The answer is if a nursing woman, means a mother who is breastfeeding, fears that she or her child's health will be endangered by her fasting, she will be excused from fasting that day and will have to do qada after Ramadan. For the same reason, a pregnant woman will also be excused from fasting if she falls into the same criteria. Does one have to perform the qada immediately after Ramadan, or can we delay a bit? The answer is no. It doesn't have to be immediately. However, it is recommended to complete the missed fast as soon as possible because a person has no guarantee of when they will die, and we do not want to die with fasts remaining on our shoulder. Can I combine the fasts, the qada, with the 6 days of Shawwal? So here's an interesting thing, that there is a difference of opinion amongst the ulama in this regard. However, if a person does take the second opinion, which is it is permissible, then one criteria has to be kept in mind. The general ruling is it is not permissible. However, the permissibility of those ulama who say it is permissible arises on the condition if one does so with the primary intention of making up the missed fast. So the primary intention a person is saying is that I am making up the missed fast of Ramadan. For example, I missed that day, so I'm making up fast of that day. And then simultaneously, they also say, well, Allah, give me the reward of fasting for the month of Shawwal as well. But remember, we are hoping that a person will get the combined reward. However, what is important is to remember that we should separate the two, which means we should do qada later and we should do the 6 days of Shawwal later. Why are we fasting in the month of Shawwal? The sixth fast, which is after Ramadan, after the day of Eid, obviously. The fasting on the day of Eid is not permissible. The reason being is Rasulullah ﷺ says, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan and follows it by fasting 6 days of Shawwal, as if Allah Ta'ala will give him the reward of as if fasting the entire year. Now, a person is asking this question: I have never fasted in my whole life. Do I need to keep both qada and kafara? The answer is no. Only qada is necessary because this person never intended fasting. The kafara only comes in when a person starts the day with the intention of fasting and then he deliberately breaks the fast. Only then is qada and kafara necessary. Otherwise, only qada. Flying, aeroplane. The spelling is based on the England vocabs. The general principle is one does not need to fast, but is given immense reward for fasting even while traveling. Remember, a person will base his fast on the time zone of the area of the plane where he is currently flying through. So use the flight magazine or the flight timetables and see where I currently am and is it sunset where I currently am. We can even ask the stewards what time does Fajr come in, or we can watch because we are so a high altitude. We can actually open the window and look outside and see that is it time or what time will sunrise happen, break of dawn happen. Based on that, we can do the sahri accordingly, and then we can have our iftar after sunset of wherever I'm flying through. Anyway, this is rewarding, but it is not necessary because you are flying. That means you are going over 48 miles. That makes you a Shari'i traveler. So while you're a Shari'i traveler, you don't necessarily have to fast, but you will be rewarded for doing so. Let's talk about those who are exempt. We're almost at the end of the presentation. A traveler will do qada after the month of Ramadan. An ill person will do qada uh, 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 after the month of Ramadan, or if it's a chronic illness, then they will give fidya. And this is based on the verse of the Quran. What is fidya? Fidya is the amount which is equivalent to sadaqat al-fitr and is given in exchange of keeping fasts. What are the conditions of fidya? For a person who is ill, as long as the condition remains chronic, such as that a person cannot fast either in Ramadan or make up later, they will continue to give fidya instead of fasting because it's a chronic illness. Chronic illness means an illness that does not get better and a person has to live with it till he dies or she dies. However, if the condition still improves miraculously, in that case, a person will have to make up the fasts even though they paid fidya for it, and those fidya will now become nafal sadaqah. اللهم لك صمت وعلى رزقك أفطرت and ذهب الظماء وابتلت العروق وثبتت الأجر إن شاء الله. These are the two du'as which we may recite when breaking the fast. And remember, during that time, all du'as are accepted. So my humble request to everyone is let's make a list of all the du'as and make it one of the primary goals for men to say, oh Allah, give me halal rizq and a pious wife and pious children, and for all our sisters to make dua that, oh Allah, give me a pious husband and a pious family. This is fundamentally one of the biggest, as we say, milestones in our life. If we can get a pious spouse, Allah Ta'ala will make the rest of our life easy, and we'll be able to build up ourselves and our children, next generation, on the path of Allah, inshallah, and become a means of Islam growing and surviving and thriving in this country. So whatever else other du'as you make, please make sure you make this du'a as well for yourself. Don't forget the Muslims in Gaza and Palestine and all the other Muslims who are being oppressed in the world, and make du'a for the preservation of our deen and iman and protection from all types of harms and evil and all types of fitna and deception, as we're going through the trial, which is closer to the trial times of Dajjal. So more and more deceptions will come, which means the wrong things will be made to seem right, and right things will made to seem to be wrong. So we want to make sure that we are safe from it, and we can do that through dua. So once again, summarizing what we discussed in terms of action, make sure we protect our fast and keep the fast well. Make sure we utilize the time of Ramadan to build an attachment to the Quran. Make sure we utilize the times and make as much as dua as we can, and perform your full 20 rakas tarawih. Don't look for discounts. Yes, if you're extremely tired, then you can do less and then go to sleep, but try to make it the full, so that we get the full benefit of the day and the full benefit of the night. And the last 10 nights, one of the nights will be the Laylatul Qadr, inshallah. So try to look for it, and especially the last 10 nights, try to stay awake and do as much as ibadah as possible. Whether you can do a lot of good deeds or not, that's secondary. Primarily, make sure, make sure that we do not end up committing any type of sin, as that's going to be tremendously damaging and harmful in the month of Ramadan. May Allah make us such that our Ramadan becomes meaningful, so that our rest of the year also becomes meaningful. Jazakumullah khairan. Now we can, inshallah, go on to questions, and we'll just give it a few minutes, inshallah. For our family, to make sure that we are encouraging them to maximize the benefit of Ramadan, do try to also do ta'aleem from Fadail Ramadan, virtues of Ramadan, every day at a time when everyone is home, inshallah. Okay, so if there is no other question, we can, inshallah, come to an end. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, any questions can be continued in the Ask Mufti chat, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.